I'm Jackson Potter. I'm one of the co-founders of the studio. Most recently, determined to chase and tell the stories that aren't being told, we sat down as a team and gathered 9 of our favorite artists from around the world. From LA to Miami to Nigeria and many places in between, we met our favorite artists in their hometowns and let the camera run. We quickly realized there's just something about meeting someone in their hometown. You get a real feel for what they're about and why they're creating what they're creating. One of those artists and stories took us to Chicago. And I mean all over Chicago. From basement barber to blue chip artist to selling teas at the flea, Zeph Farmby's been everywhere. He's far too humble and quiet about his life journey, but it's a story that the world needs to hear, and one we can't wait to share with you tonight and further unpack with a conversation. Zeph, thank you for trusting us with your story and this timeless body of work. And Dometi, thank you, for there are few that understand Zeph's story like you do. In addition to being a Chicago native, Dometi Pongo is a decorated journalist, with work that includes MTV News, the Smithsonian Channel, and a host of other publications. Thank you both for being here tonight, and selfishly, it's been a joy to work with both of you and call both of you friends. For
me to be having a conversation with this brother in this city at this time with all you beautiful people, it means a lot to me. So put your hands together for Jackson for making this possible, for Studio Worldwide for making this possible, for Zeph Farmby for making this possible. Thank you so much. It was funny, like we had an option. Me and Zeph were like, all right, we could just start off right here so it could be a little smoother. And I said, no, I want to walk real dramatically to the front. And so, exactly, with my glasses on. It's dark as hell in this bitch. I don't see none of y'all. But he's an artist, so I want to be dramatic too. So as he makes his way to the stage, I would love to hear a rousing round of applause for the man himself, Zeph Farmby. Let's hear it. There you go. Take your time, Zeph. Walk slow. Zeph, first of all, congratulations, man, one more time, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. I won't waste any more time. I think what was super ill in watching that piece was you and Dan outside the swap trying to sell shirts for $1. And those people had a chance to be early collectors and missed that opportunity. Yes. And there's this weird juxtaposition because it kind of sounds like a lesson in how the buyer and their taste level determines the value of the art. So because the swap meet customer isn't the Zeph Farmby customer, they didn't see the value. But the Lark, yes, they saw the value.
Yes.
Was there a lesson in that?
Yes, there was a huge lesson in that. One was, first I thought the Lark was out of my league, just because the intimidation of going to a store to say, would you like to buy my t-shirt? That's actually really hard to do because it's you got to have the confidence to be able to walk into a store, especially back then in Chicago. There were some streetwear stores that were, well, it was actually maybe 2 or 3 that were like really major stores to be in, and the Lark was so off the radar that the swap meet, the flea market, just seemed more fitting. Like, okay, even if it's bad, we could just say, all right, it didn't work out, and we'll sell the shirts out of the trunk of the car.
For a little context, fully explain what the Lark was to the crib.
Okay, the Lark was, let's imagine here in New York, like Dr. J's, or like, let me try to think of something else. Mainly Dr. J's, because it's a bigger brand store that sells like independent brands.
And premium streetwear. That's where you're getting your Avirex leathers that everybody wanted, your Pelly Pels,
the Pelly leathers,
the jackets that you wanted, the shit that you wanted, the shoes that you wanted that you couldn't get your hands on. It was there, so that felt out of reach. So what made you and Dan muster up the strength to go up there and put yourselves out there?
So what happened, we had a friend that we went to high school with. We call him, you guys may know him as Really Doe. He's a recording artist that writes songs with Kanye West and all that. So we were all just high school friends. So when we left the flea market, we were so upset. We're like, what else can we do outside of just go to the mall and look at other things, and maybe get inspired by some of the T-shirts there, whatever. And that day he was just working. So we just went in there and talked with Ugg, and he looked at us and was like, why? Like, why is the skin on your nose is peeling? Like, because we were in the sun, like, outside at the flea market when we set up a table at the flea market.
Get sunburn?
Yes, we do. I'm sure people with kids are applying tons of sunscreen on their children as they're outside playing. So yes, we do. But it was really in that moment, like, of talking with, I'll just call him Really Doe, talking with Really Doe, and him being in the space of working in retail, because the only thing myself and maybe Dan did a little bit. Dan is also here, just to let you guys know. We didn't have much retail experience outside of going to a store to shop. So on the other side of retail, you look at things from a different lens of, will my customer actually buy this? So we knew what we liked, so that's what we created. But now showing what we like to someone else, it's almost like, oh, you guys got some flavor right here. This is, stylish, and there's a market for it. We didn't know that. We just knew that this was something different that could potentially go in the store, but we also didn't have any knowledge on doing anything with wholesale, or even the knowledge of going to find a silk screener, a printer to actually print the merchandise. You know what I'm saying? So all these things were like trial and error, even knowing like a quality T-shirt to paint on or to print on. So we're starting with going to Walgreens and buying 3 for $10. Let's go paint on this. And it's like, okay, the paint is bleeding through, going to the back of the shirt. So now this is a practice T-shirt. You know what I'm saying? But we ended up wearing the practice T-shirts, but in our neighborhoods, and our friends were saying like, how can I get one of those?
And how much are those shirts worth today?
Oh.
Is that a side conversation? Is it like that?
Well, I will say this. I haven't done many hand-painted T-shirts. I have done some Singaporean army jackets that I've customized.
I knew he was going to bring up the Singaporean. Let me, look, when I bumped into Zeph, and mind you, I only knew him peripherally. We have a lot of friends in common.
Yes.
And I was walking into Dumbo, and he had his installation downstairs.
Yep.
And so I walk in. Did you visit the installation?
Yes, indeed.
And so I walk in, I'm like, yo, Zeph, good to meet you. He was familiar with me. I ain't say this, but I was like, this nigga know who I am. You know what I mean? I was like, yo, I would love to leave with a piece. Yo, what's this jacket? This is Singaporean.
Yo, no.
He tried to say it as non-pretentious as he could.
No, it wasn't.
But it just was what it was. He was like, I sourced these from Singapore. Took it off of the body of it. Like, I'm like, yo. But yeah, explain these raw-ass jackets.
Okay, the jackets that I recently painted on were Singaporean army jackets. These are jackets that you can only get from Singapore. So they will not be sold in the U.S. And my wife and I were traveling in Singapore, and while I was there, some clients of mine chose to take me around, and it was like, oh, we see that you like painting on jackets, so we want to take you by a vintage shop. And at this vintage shop, they had these Singaporean jackets, and that's how I learned about the jackets and the rarity of the jackets. And at the time, they were saying like, oh, you paint the jackets, and then we'll just ship it back to us, and we'll have us, a few jackets. And for me, I didn't have a ton of time to just dedicate to painting jackets, so I didn't get to painting the jackets until years later. And once I painted the jackets, I was like, oh, this is, this pretty fire. Like, I may want to keep it for myself. I ended up giving one to my wife, which she wore it one time, and she's like, I don't want to wear it again. I don't want the paint to crack on it. But then over time, when people would come by my studio, because I had never even shown them to the public at an art show or anything like that. So in my studio, people would see the jackets and just be impressed by the execution, because it was a hand-painted jacket. There was no silk screen on it, none of that. It was all done by hand. And just to speed up the story, going to having the space downstairs, the pop-up where I took over the J. Crew space here at Empire Stores, that's when it was like this spotlight went to like, whoa, this jacket is extremely rare. There's only one. Like I felt like, you know, if someone from Nike or something made one shoe, and not even the left shoe, just one right shoe, and it was like, this is very rare. And if you get one of these right here, so that's how that then made me feel. So, but again, it's like, you know, I'm really just creating art. So I'm not looking at, because I could make another one, right? It may not be a Singaporean jacket, but I could just go paint another jacket.
But and we talked about this that day, though. What's interesting to me is you have these images and totems that you use that serve two purposes. They just fly aesthetically, right? So even if I didn't know that you chose Singaporean jackets because you like the quality, what it represented from that space, and you love how it was cropped, how it fit, how it hung. And then you had these patches with these different messages and some of your art on the back of them. It just looks good. But then we had a deeper conversation about what each piece of it actually meant. So I'm curious to know, with a lot of art fans, we see things like the Campbell suit, Andy Warhol joints, and we're like, I don't get it. Or we see these things that we don't really get that next thing. So is your work for the people who find it aesthetically pleasing, or the people who can see the subversive message behind your art? Who is it for?
It's a lane for both, but for me, where I'm creating the art from is from the messaging in what's being created. And like, cause some of those patches were hand painted that I just came up with. They just looked like a patch that was actually stitched on, and you know what I mean? So these are things that are all like, they mean something to me. But now when other people are seeing it, it also means something different to them. But then once I give the, you know, meaning behind what I created, now it kind of serves two purposes. Because for them, they're looking at the aesthetic like, oh, when I go out tomorrow, this is gonna, you know what I'm saying? But for me, it's like you're wearing something that has a ton of meaning to it.
Even the pop art pieces, like the cartoon characters holding a rifle, we had a long conversation about how these supposedly family cartoons were rooted in racism when they started off. And then you juxtapose them with black boys and you show them holding rifles to show that they are dangerous messages and what was supposed to be art and fun-loving art for us. What do you think the prevailing message is behind your art that you want to shine through? What is it?
So once I recognized how influential art is, and even going back to my childhood, seeing those cartoons that had these meanings in it, because as a child, you're just entertained by it. But as an adult, now you could see, wait, what are you watching on TV? What is this?
I saw a Bugs Bunny cartoon in blackface, and It was one of my favorite cartoons. And wait a minute.
We were entertained by that as a, you know, young child, just seeing colorful animations on TV. So for those pieces that I created with, you know, those illustrations in it, I wanted to pull the viewer in by saying, oh, this is a rabbit, right? And it has this particular shape, like something popular, Bugs Bunny or Mickey Mouse, whatever, right? But now that it has your attention, you're gravitating and going back to your childhood to say, oh, I used to watch this when I was younger. But then your adult brain kicks in and you're like, wait a minute, what am I looking at here? Mm-hmm. And then you start seeing like all these different layers and layers and layers. You know what I mean? Yeah. So going back to that meaning of what the art actually is from where I'm creating it from.
So what do you think it is that keeps black folks out of the art world, right? Like you asked a question, multiple questions. When I said, who wants to be a future collector? And I know y'all like art. I know some of y'all, I've been in y'all cribs. Like y'all got dope art in the house. Ill prints, ill frames, all of that shit. Like what do you think it is? What keeps black folks or urban culture, not even just black folks, but even people who come from modest means, what keeps us out of becoming collectors?
One is, I think it's a couple things. I think it's intimidation, because you don't know what you don't know. So it's like it kind of falls onto the ignorance of us not being educated in different spaces. The other thing is just the awareness, because when I was younger, I didn't know a ton of artists where I could just go to art shows. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it was like me going to an art gallery didn't happen until I was in college. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. So all that time before that, I had been creating art, But I didn't know I could just walk in the gallery and talk to the person sitting at the desk. I didn't know I could just go to an opening and just hang out at the opening. I don't have to drink the box wine, but I could still go and hang out. You know what I'm saying? But like, I didn't know that. And that's the thing that we don't know as people. Just the awareness sometimes is not always there. So then we start putting these other things in front of it, making us afraid of it. So then we never do it.
You think that's for lack of places that speak to us specifically? Because I've gone to art galleries downtown. I've been in multiple spots, and you walk in and you feel like you don't belong. They look at you like you don't belong. It wasn't until I found communities in Pilsen, and you remember back when they had the art walks in Pilsen. Any of y'all been in those? Y'all know what I'm talking about from the crib? Yup. You know what I mean? That made me feel, oh, this is accessible. And I started throwing shows there, but I didn't know that was open to us. Is that what made you partner with Studio Worldwide to open this up? Like, what do you think it is that we are missing in terms of closing that gap between making spaces that feel natural and authentic to us?
So the one thing about the studio and what they're trying to create is bring awareness to artists from around the world, but they also want to remove that intimidation to say, oh, you can come to an activation and have a good time and also see some art, talk to the artist. Something like this is like, you know what I mean? I mean, not this Soho House or Dumbo House, so it's a little bit different, but you know what I mean? Still something that's open to the public that doesn't feel so guarded by so many different layers of things. You know what I mean? So almost like the first time you walked into a designer store and you don't even know if you could touch, oh, should I touch that belt? I don't know, they following me. And, you know what I'm saying? So the gallery, someone is sitting at a desk. It's all white, you know what I mean? It's sterile. You looking like, oh man, it's colorful, and you know. So then you're like, oh, I got a question, but it's kind of dumb, so I don't want to say the dumb question and be that person. So all those things keep us out. But what the Studio Worldwide is creating is a platform that's not only focused on showing an image and putting verbiage about who this artist is. It's like they want to go steps further. You know what I mean? So it becomes that much more engaging because, I mean, social media is something that's intimidating the first time you post it. Man, look at this picture I posted. I can look at this filter. I don't even, you know what I'm saying? But then once you kind of get the key to it, then you're like, oh, you don't, oh, let me go back and delete that one and just keep all the, you know, the good stuff. But it's still, once you learn about it, now, then you start introducing your friends to it. Hey, you should come by this gallery opening with me. I ain't ever been to no gallery. Hey, what they gonna do up there? It's bougie and you know what I mean? So it's not always that. It's true. You know what I'm saying? It's not always that. Although it may feel that way, it's not that. You know what I'm saying? So
I had an experience before, like my lady in the back, back in the day. I used to take this girl to a lot of art galleries, and she was like, we never go on dates where you spend money. Like, are you okay? Like, is everything cool? I was like, I need one of those I like art type girls. You know, that's when I met my baby. But knowing this and having this ethos, what made you even decide to go to art school?
for me, I knew, okay, so there's two things I thought I was going to be in life. One, I thought I was going to be in the NBA, and I thought I was going to be an artist. That was it. And when I was younger, like my teenage years, I had an injury, and with that injury, I was told that I wouldn't be able to play basketball at that level. So from that day forward, I didn't look at anything else outside of creating art. So if it was me, you know, tagging a building, you know, winning competitions in high school, like I won tons and tons of competitions where it's like art was just always around me. So it was just nothing else that spoke to me.
But at the same time, I would feel like I don't need this. Like, I don't necessarily need to go. Like, you already had been an artist, you know. We talked about this before. I remember I was talking to an artist, and I said, what made you decide to become an artist? And they just laughed at me, like, laughed for real. And she was like, you don't decide to become an artist, you just are. And so I thought she was being fake deep. And then after a while, it just stuck with me for a minute. And I was like, you don't decide. You just are. Okay, what ends up happening? We grow up, we want to make money, we don't see an avenue where art can support our lives in real time. We, you know, try to appease our parents, the people around us, we get jobs, and then we end up losing our creative side, or maybe hopefully getting a job that allows us to give 10% of what our creative side is. with that in mind, you go into debt going to an art school to do something you already know how to do. What did the education provide you that you didn't have before?
The one thing I thought it was going to provide was a direct connection to like Marvel comics or, because some of the people that, when you see these movie posters, that's created by an artist. Because it's not all just photography. These are paintings, some of them are. Okay. You know what I mean? So for people that love Harry Potter, some of these things are created in an artist's studio and then is brought to the big screen. So for me, seeing that, I thought that, okay, I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna end up, working here, I'm gonna do this, and
so
you know what I mean?
Path. You had a specific place to go.
Yeah.
And where did art end up taking you?
It took me to entrepreneurship. So the one thing that did benefit me, like in the video that played, was the clients that I actually, from cutting hair, those clients ended up being people like Lil Rel and like all these big comedians now, where back then it was like, oh, I'm going on Comic View, I'm gonna wear your t-shirt on Comic View, right? But from wearing that t-shirt on Comic View, other people saw it, but then said, who made your shirt? That then turned into, oh, can he make me something? Oh, he's a real painter. So now those people turn into clients of buying other works. So I kind of had this thing where the different worlds that I was in all really did come together in a way where it didn't have to be because I cut your hair, you're not gonna buy art from me. It was like, because I'm cutting your hair, you're now also looking at the easel of something that I'm creating. And you're like, hey, how much is that when you right. You take payment plans? You know what I'm saying? But that's kind of how it
because it used to
worked
be
for me.
that, like, if your barber rap, you ain't asking for a mixtape. Like, you know what I mean?
Well,
like,
he was already playing it.
Exactly. But now it's like, oh, this is so there was a different appreciation for it. Speaking of which, we got work in the space. If you could briefly, just 2 more questions, because I know people want to get a chance to ask you their questions firsthand. Can you speak to some of the pieces that are on the wall that we're looking at? Let's start with Michigan. You're from 124.
Yes.
Speak to that.
Yes.
Speak to that piece.
So for me, 124th in Michigan is really the roots of everything for me, where even some of the artists that are here now who are doing really big things in different shows and everything all over the world, I would see them doing graffiti. And, me being younger by a few years, I'm like, oh, man, I got to get my style like theirs at some point. But with them inspiring me, a lot of things then took me out of the neighborhood, but then a lot of those things brought me back to the neighborhood. Because where I grew up was, it's gang affiliated. So me telling my friends who on both sides of the street are different gangs, one gang on this side, a different gang on that side, I'm right in the middle, and I'm like, they're like, oh, we finna go and do this at the park. And I'm like, I'm gonna go spray paint on this building and put my name up a couple times. They're like, what? But for me, that it just continued to speak to me in a way that those roots, even a funny story about 124th Street, there was here y'all would call it a bodega. In Chicago, we just call it a corner store. Yeah, so I wrote my name on a corner store, just right on a corner, but it was a busy street. And that night that I went out tagging, some of those gang members also went out with me because it's late night. I got a backpack full of cans and I'm running. Hey, man, where you going? Where you going with? So I'm like, oh, I'm just finna go tag on this building real quick. What is tagging? Oh, you finna just write your name on there. Okay, you write your name first. Let me see how it look. So I'm thinking we're just close friends. So next thing you know, they're like, oh, let me see that can. I could write better than you. But then they write gang signs next to it. So I was popular, on that bus route. I was popular for like 2 days because the popularity diminished quickly because my brother would see things that I was writing, at home in the basement. And he told my mom, like, hey, I think he out there writing on that building and they got 6-point stars and all this other stuff, next to it. And my mother said, if you did that, go and block your name out. I don't want your name to be associated with these other symbols. And I'm like, you don't do that. I'm getting love on the bus when I'm going to school in the morning. But now, you know, the next day I gotta go into it's a big red block over my name. So now that popularity that I had was like, ooh, look at that tag. And I was like, hey, somebody wrote over your name. Hey, Zeph, somebody wrote over your name. And I'm like, yo, it was me, man. My mom wasn't feeling that. So, but that's what happened. But all of that was happening on 124th Street.
Damn. So all of that,
yes, and
is what undergirds that symbol right there.
Yeah.
We got the first black mayor right here.
Yes.
We got this image with Fred Hampton right here. Talk about this piece in the center, that iconic Chicago pick.
Yes.
My bad, I'm stealing you. I'm talking about this.
So this piece is titled Reaping the Benefits, and it started as me sketching myself in my studio, because a lot of times when I'm creating art, I never draw myself. So, and a lot of things were really just practice for me. So it started as just something I was practicing, but then over time I noticed that from studio visits, a lot of art collectors were then looking at the sketches like, oh, there's something special about this. So for me, in this particular piece, it's showing a lot of things that were in my childhood home, from the Jet magazine, you know, with Cicely Tyson on the cover, Harold Washington being the first mayor, and the Evans family, Good Times. And there's a funny story with that, because when I was younger, my dad would not let the family watch Good Times. But the one thing that inspired me about Good Times was the opening credits, Ernie Barnes' painting. I was glued to that. That was the biggest inspiration for me becoming an artist. So it's not that I'm drawing it for the sake of Good Times. I'm drawing it because Ernie Barnes had inspired me, you know what I mean, to actually create art. So, but yeah, it was a long time I couldn't watch Good Times. Turn it off my TV. Go to channel 32. Go to channel 50. Like, yeah. But yeah,
you ain't had cable either.
We didn't until later.
Yeah, we had 9/11, 2650. Yeah,
that was it. But this piece does speak to where my life is now and where my life was, and even some of the books. These are some of the books I have underneath my coffee table. Some are in my studio, and of course, for all that know me or have seen me in the neighborhood, we have a Great Dane. So to have Pharaoh right there in my studio. He was sleeping, and it was me just saying, I want to do something and practice in my studio. I set up my tripod, took a selfie, made a sketch, and was like, what else can I turn this into? So all of these pieces that you see on a gallery wall that's behind this actual image that represents me were all created. These were individual pieces that I created before. And once I put it together, I'm like, wow, this is really telling the story of what my coffee table used to look like. You know, from mom and pop, you know, just, you know, having subscriptions of Ebony magazines and all these things. But I didn't know that those things were still being deeply rooted into my psyche and my thinking. Because now I am seeing a black person on the cover of a magazine, right? So yeah, all these things are things that spoke to me. But then as I'm creating this piece in my studio and being a new dad, and at this time, my daughter, she could talk a little bit. So anything I created, she was just blown away. I could draw a circle, and it looked like an oval, and she's like, Dad, look at this! Right? But then seeing this right here, she's like, oh, there's Pharaoh. Oh, this is Dad. Oh, we have this book at home. So that started to speak to me in a number of ways, even me coming up with the title from her saying these things, from just being in my studio, seeing different references and different things, you know, just a sketch on the table. So that's when I started thinking, like, man, what could the title be? So in that actual mini doc, at the time, I was going to title the piece Knowledge of Self, because for me, I wanted to really highlight the books that are, you know, in the actual piece. But then as I started to step back from it and look at the bigger picture, then I looked at, okay, yeah, this is reaping the benefits, because I'm reaping the benefits of what my mom and dad did, the grandparents, and now being a dad of 2, it's like my children will now reap the benefits of the groundwork that me and my wife are doing now. So, yeah.
I can't think of a better way to bookend this conversation. Can y'all make some noise for my brother Zeph Farmby? I won't take up any more of y'all time because we have T-shirts over here, we have cards that explain who Zeph is, and we have Zeph here himself. So the rest of this night is about you interviewing my mans. My name is Dometi Pongo. It has been an honor to be here. But make some noise one more time for Zeph Farmby. Thank you
so much.
To Dumbo for the space.
Yes.
Thank you to Jackson and the crew for putting this together and documenting this.
Yes.
And for all of the friends and family that are here to celebrate our brother. Yes. One more time, real loud for Zeph Farmby.
First of all, I think everyone in this room who is familiar with you, knows you, we are extremely proud of you.
Thank you.
That's first and foremost. Seeing your artwork evolve over the years, and I've only known you for 2.5 years, has been a blessing, and I am blessed to have your pieces in my personal space. Congratulations on the Grammy nomination for the J. Ivy album cover.
Yes, thank you so much.
That's probably the only reason I will watch the Grammy, to see if you win. But I would love to know, especially now with everything, there's so much evolution going on with you personally, just your family, your art, everything. Looking back, what would you tell your 21-year-old self now?
Okay, so I would say if it speaks to you, continue with it. Don't let anyone steer you away from it. Because, you know, sometimes, what's that saying? There's too many chefs or too many chefs in the kitchen, right? Remove all those. Go and make those mistakes. Bump your head, because those mistakes are lessons. Don't look at it as a failure. I didn't look at it as a failure, because now, once I looked at things that would be deemed a failure, a lesson, I wanted to fail more. So that's what I would tell my younger self. Like, go out there, let somebody dish you about your T-shirts. Yo, these T-shirts whack, fam. I don't like this. And I leave the store mad, but then guess what? Let me go find a better T-shirt, because maybe it is whack. You know what I'm saying? But now once I found a better T-shirt, then what happened? You get what I'm saying? So, like, I would say kick all those other chefs out the kitchen. You just go do everything, bump your head, and figure it out.
All right. What's going on, brother?
Peace, fam.
So you brought up the question of accessibility, which is like I think about a lot. For someone who is looking, what would be your insight or advice to give someone who wants to transition? What's the most important thing someone who wants to collect art should consider?
Consider, first off, liking whatever piece it is that you really love. Don't look at a piece of art and say, oh, this artist is popular, so I want to go get that. If it doesn't speak to you, don't even look at it. Don't even, like, remove it. The other thing is, start at where, you know, your pockets will allow you to start. You don't have to look at, oh, he has this large piece and I got the living room wall for it. No, it doesn't work that way. Start with collecting prints. You know, a lot of collections do start from a print collection, because then you start to educating yourself more about different artists, because some artists don't even make prints. You know what I mean? Even if there's a building that has an open studio, go by that open studio and get familiar with some of the artists in there, because you can potentially buy an original piece of work from the artist out of the studio. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of different avenues into collecting, but I would definitely start with falling in love with the piece. Even if it is a print, love that piece, because this piece is going to be living with you in your place or wherever you choose to put it.
I started my collection with prints too, but then I started getting sneaky. If I knew the artist, I'd be like, hey, sign this for me. And write a number right there, like what, you know, just to make it value a little more. And then I put it in an expensive frame, because when it's set back in the frame, you can't tell that I got this from Xerox machines. Do we have one more question?
Yeah. When you're looking at a blank canvas and you're about to like start a piece or something, like, what's your thought process? How do you get started, and then how do you like push that forward to a final piece?
The first thing I do is try to remove the intimidation of seeing a blank canvas. So putting something on the canvas. it doesn't matter what it is. You can go to the canvas, because sometimes with me, I don't always know what I'm gonna do. Like sometimes I'll just have some framework of a quick sketch, and now that I'm actually working on the canvas, this quick sketch is now being done larger, but then I find myself getting into this meditative state of concentration where now the piece is now becoming magic. So that's the first thing for me as an artist, is to remove that intimidation, because you can look at a blank, everybody moved into an apartment before. When you look at that apartment, it's not furnished. But by the time you get it comfortable, you're like, wow, this really came together. Because for me, I'm looking at the end and not looking at, where am I going to start? What am I going to put up in this corner? No, just let the energy take you where it's going to take you. And as you continue to step back from it and then get engaged with the art again, it then takes you somewhere else. So that's what I would, say to do.
I've been holding I want to clap after every response, because that parallels so much of, as a journalist, like you start with a story, you start with a big issue, and I get decision paralysis about where to start. And so I don't want to pontificate too long, but in so many different disciplines, having a blank canvas is one of the most daunting, intimidating things before you start. So I love that you made that something that applies to different kinds of art.
For sure, yeah.
Do we have one more? Bet.
Yes.
Sit that back that way.
I just have a quick question, which is, you seem to be really prolific. You really crank out the work. And I'd be really curious to know what your work day is like. Do you start every day at the same time? Are you waiting for inspiration? And you've also got 2 little kids. You're managing a lot, and I'm really impressed.
Okay, so my work day is very consistent. So if you can think of someone in the Navy where they start at like 4 a.m. or 4:30, and then, I'm going to go and work out, or I'm going to go and meditate, then I'm going to go and walk my dog, and then I'm going to do this. And so all of my days all start the same way. But now having 2 kids is a little bit different, because they are starting, like, let me hurry up and get back to give my wife a break, where before it was just with my daughter, it would be me being up at 4 a.m., and for me, being up early was easier to have that alone time to let my mind just be by itself, and for me to have and to soak in whatever moment is happening. If I'm playing, some type of meditative music, whatever my thoughts are, I can now live in those thoughts before the noise of my day actually happens. And by the time I get to the studio, I kind of know where and what I'm going to work on. Because if I'm working on a new body of work, I'm already so submerged into the subjects and seeing how far I can actually take the work, with it being something that looks to be so simple, but something that also holds so much meaning. And then, after that, walk the dog, go back home, and now it's time for daddy daycare. So, yeah. But that's, yeah.
Yeah, right. Last one. If you are waking up at 4, when the fuck are you going to sleep?
Okay, so how about this? Last night, I was up until 2 or 3. Yeah, like 3 a.m., 2:46 to be exact. I looked at my phone, 2:46? I got to get up at 4 o'clock. The reason why, and this is a good reason, my best good friend, Dan, flew in from Chicago. He and his wife, Sonia, and they had a late night flight. So my wife, Yana, she was sleeping when they showed up, because they got to our apartment around 1 a.m. But then when they got there, I didn't want to just say, all right, man, we're a little bit tired. We got the new baby and everything. So we started hanging out a little bit. Yana woke up, and we started having these amazing conversations. And then my best good friend started asking, you got a drink? Let's make a drink. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So, but my morning ended, but I took a nap, somewhat of a nap, and then started the day. Because one thing about me, in our apartment, is if my dog is to hear the floor creak, that means it's time to go outside. It doesn't matter what time it is. He could be sleeping, and then it's like, oh, wait, oh, you awake? Oh, we're about to leave. Let's go outside. Right. So, but yeah, for me, the earlier, the better. But sometimes I listen to my body a lot. If I need the rest, I get the rest. I never force it. That's the other thing. I will never force myself to stay doing something when my body is telling me not to. So, yeah. So I do get sleep. Don't think I don't, but yeah.
Well, man, it's not often we get to get in the mind of a creative and commune with them in the same space. So we'll end it right there because I want to give y'all an opportunity to interface with them. And it's kind of a pregame, too, because I know how y'all get down. A lot of us going to drink. It's probably the first stop on a long night. So, you know what I mean? Get some libations. Talk to Zeph. Got some shirts back here. Thank you again, Jackson, the studio worldwide. And one more time for Zeph Farmby.
Yes. Thank you guys so much.
All right. For real this time?
No, for real.
For real this time?
This is like special, though. For real. It is. Like, even all of y'all that was sending me the pictures from the elevator, like, I see your picture at Dumbo House. I'm like, what? So this is very special to me. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.